He kōna e purangi tēnei nā te reo irirangi o Aotearoa.
Kia ora, nau mai hana mai ki te ao hurahanga, ko Clacking Cannon tēnei. And nei te rau papa pūtai au ki te raumati. It's the Our Changing World Summer Science Series, and today an episode from another great RNZ podcast. Here Now is hosted and produced by Kadambari Raghukumar, and it's about the journeys people make to New Zealand and their identities and perspectives which shape their lives here. This episode is about a botanical power couple based in Canterbury and the tropical jungle plants that brought them together.
Some of our most memorable companions were three priests. This is starting to sound like a joke. Huh? So the local government office that we coordinated our fieldwork with, they insisted that these three priests should come along. And the reasoning behind that was that the priests would be respected with anyone we would come across in the forest. And it turned out that they were more than right. And not only did we manage to stay out of trouble, they could perhaps even be credited for some of our scientific discoveries.
Tales from deep in the jungles of the Philippines, where botanists Pieter Pelser and his wife Julie Barcelona, whom you'll hear shortly, have spent a large chunk of their life exploring.
That day we were looking for very rare plants, and we spent a whole day looking for them and couldn't find them. And at some point I think the priests just had enough and said, well, it might be more time efficient if we would start praying that we would come across them. So seriously, no longer than I think 10 minutes or so after they wrapped up their prayers, we found the plants that we were looking for all day. So yeah, mission accomplished.
But there's a good reason why they needed to be accompanied on that occasion by Catholic priests. The Christchurch-based taxonomists go deep into the jungle for their fieldwork on rare plant species. Here, conflict between armed groups, insurgents and the military isn't as rare as seeing foreigners.
Most of our fieldwork takes place in quite remote areas. And that means that we might be interacting with people who are not really used to seeing outsiders in the forest that we're working in. And it can happen that these people, if they bump into strangers, that they might be a bit suspicious or maybe even concerned. So for that reason, local governments often send people with us to avoid problems, and they can be people like indigenous leaders or maybe local government officials that are familiar with the people in the area. But it's also possible that they send us police or military.
This is Here Now, and I'm your host and producer, Kadambari Raghukumar. I'm meeting with Netherlands-born Pieter and his wife Julie at the University of Canterbury today. She's Filipina. Pieter is the curator of the university's herbarium, and not long after I arrive, we're looking through some very old specimens of plants, some pressed all the way back in the 1800s. Julie is a research associate here. Over the years, the pair have come to be really well known for their research around the rare and large parasitic flower Rafflesia. It's endemic to the Southeast Asian region and known for its very peculiar smell. Describe the smell to me.
Like a dead rat, or very, very strong smell.
Putrid.
Because the pollinators are flies, so they have to have a way to attract them.
They smell really bad.
Yeah,
they smell
yeah.
like decaying meat.
Yes.
Yeah, the pollinators, the flies, they think that there's a rotting corpse of an animal that they can lay their eggs in.
Mm-hmm.
So they are attracted to the smell, and then they enter this part right here. And then they go around this rim that you might see here, and it has all kinds of sticky pollen grains in there, and that's where they kind of move around and then ultimately figure out there's nothing really for them to get. But by that time, they picked up some of that sticky pollen on their back.
No fresh samples of the smelly flowers available here at hand, of course, but Pieter and Julie have preserved in alcohol several samples that they picked up in the Philippines on trips they've made with Marsden research grants. This is a smaller sample, but these flowers can be anything, say, between a dinner plate size to 5 feet wide. They are really unusual in that Rafflesia are entirely contained within the tissue of their host plants, only emerging to produce spectacular flowers, the largest of all flowering plants.
Yeah, so this is a very rare species of, or at least it's locally not that rare, but there are only very few places in the Philippines where you can find it. So this is a flower preserved on on alcohol. So what I'll do is I'll tip some of that alcohol out. So that you can see the flower a bit better. Yeah. Julie collected this in 2010.
Julie and Pieter have together found and named at least 3 species of Rafflesia in their many adventures to the island. Their discoveries have actually really helped put the Philippines at the centre of interest and research on this largely unknown and endangered species. Rafflesia is so unique that all but 1 species are found only on single islands.
Since 1842, there were only 3 recognized, actually 2 recognized species until 2001 when, we named this. It was discovered in the island where I came from.
What island do you come from?
Panay. It's in the west central part of the Philippines.
And what was it like there?
Yeah. What was it like
Well,
there?
it's like the whole world is the island because you never in your wildest dream think about that there are other islands like that. Because honestly, the Philippines, I think, is one, although we are one of the mobile, we have a lot of seamen and a lot of people who works abroad. But if you're there, it's just, that's it, right?
But Julie had her eyes set well beyond her island. She's travelled the world doing fieldwork on rare plant species, but it was what was actually growing in her own backyard that she returned to spending the largest chunk of her research life on.
Actually, it's really ironic because, I came from that island, but I never saw it. Because whenever I go home, my mom would never allow me to go to the mountains. It's like, so she'd never realized what my job is, that in other islands, I've been spending my time for months in the mountains. And so I never had a chance to explore because whenever I go home, I just go home.
And this was just right there in your backyard?
Yeah,
pretty
a group of hiking and biking professionals. They're, usually single and they hike and bike every weekend, and in one of those trips they found this. And so that was the 3rd species of Rafflesia that was discovered in the Philippines. But then until now, between 2001, 2024, we already have 14?
15 now.
15 now.
Yeah.
So it's quite a recent area
Yeah.
of research and study, isn't it?
And
In the sense
discoveries.
of and discovery.
And to think how big they are. They're not like this minuscule plant that anybody can easily miss, right?
So why do you think that is? I mean, how can you go past something like this and not be... How can you not notice it?
Where you have like the 3rd largest flower in the world not being spotted for such a long time. And for me it is a combination of these plants being quite rare and people just not appreciating how much there is to discover in a rainforest, all this hidden biodiversity, because if you can overlook the 3rd largest flower in the world, you can only imagine what the other things are that you don't see.
Why is it of any relevance to us here in New Zealand?
It's relevant, I think, for the big picture.
The whole world.
We are looking at patterns of biodiversity and how biodiversity originates. And sometimes we can learn most from the most bizarre forms of life that we can see. These are the paradigm breakers. They challenge our current perceptions. So that's why the Royal Society of New Zealand provided us with a grant to go to the Philippines and learn how these plants have evolved and to help address some of their conservation challenges as well.
Julie and Pieter met in the States in the mid-2000s, and it was a love or obsession really for plants of tropical jungles that really brought them together. So what's ensued has been years of shared adventures and some peculiar romantic gestures, including metal casts of Rafflesia to decorate their wedding.
I think for a scientific project to be successful, you need to disagree quite a bit. It really helps to get these very different opinions and perspectives, and Julie has so much experience working in the Philippines on plants, whereas my background might be stronger in the data analysis and kind of bringing those together and bouncing off hypotheses and finding the common ground that gets the interesting stuff out.
So we complement each other.
As botanists, have either of you ever named a discovery after one of you?
Yes, I did make the mistake of naming a species of pitcher plant after Julie. So we were together and found the species of pitcher plant, and we talked to colleagues there, and we concluded that it was new and described it, and I named it Nepenthes barcelonae after Julie Barcelona.
And why was it a mistake?
It was a big mistake because I forgot that a colleague from Australia already told me that he was working on describing and naming it. And I only found out after the species was published, and I proudly showed Julie
I was mad.
Your grand romantic gesture that went horribly wrong.
It went horribly wrong, and she was upset, and she told me why. She was so surprised that I didn't remember that this other researcher was working on it. So I quickly reached out to the other researcher and apologized for it, and he was very understanding and very nice about it. But I don't think Julie's ever forgiven me. Once.
And there was most recent orchid that's named after us, the two of us, and they're together in one area.
Yeah, so there's
In the Philippines?
Yeah.
In the Philippines, 2 orchid species were described, and they grow together. So one of them, and they're in the same genus. So one was named Bulbophyllum barcelonii, and the other one was named Bulbophyllum pelseri. So
Yeah.
and the nice thing about it was that it ended up in the national news, in the largest newspaper, on a page where also a photo of Nicole Kidman was printed, and our photo was bigger than.
The Nicole Kidman.
But it's not just the notoriety of being on the same page as Nicole Kidman's photos, but also sharing the thrill of research and discovery in the tropics, even if it's a world away from Canterbury. That's Here Now this week with me, Kadambari Raghukumar. Big thanks to Julie and Pieter for talking to me about their incredible research on Rafflesia all the way in the Philippines. Today's episode was mixed by Jeremy Ansell. You can find Here Now on all your favourite podcast platforms, and you'll also find a video of the story on the Here Now website, which is rnz.co.nz/herenow. Thanks for listening.